And music supervisors love sync agents because they are one-stop and it saves them so much work.
And I think for us and why a lot of the supervisors that we work with love us is music supervisors are creatives.
Yes.
Like they have done a lot of administrative work and they've done the headaches of having to clear 14 different owners and publishers and but that's not what they love. They love being creative. And so when they can be creative and come and get this thing cleared and approved for their customer, their client very quickly, it makes their lives so much easier.
Yes. What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book. Today, my guest is Daniel McCarthy. He is the CEO of FM, which includes the platform Musicbed. Now, Musicbed is one of the more popular sync licensing hybrid platforms, which includes your more traditional sync licensing company, sync agents, that sort of stuff, but also a music library. We get into how all this works. Basically, they work with everyone from indie filmmakers and wedding video filmmakers, photographers, all the way up to brands that place commercials on the Super Bowl and everyone in between, including TV shows, music supervisors, all that stuff. We discuss today how micro licensing works for those smaller placements and how artists get paid. We discuss how the big sync licensing works and how artists are making hundreds of thousands of dollars. He said some Musicbed artists have made millions of dollars from the placements that the Musicbed has secured for them. Musicbed works with over 1 million filmmakers that are part of their platform, which they currently have a subscription model where if you're an indie filmmaker, you can subscribe for a certain amount of money a month and then have access to the catalog for your placements. And then, of course, they do one-off sync placements for the bigger placements. I've said placements a lot. I got to come up with a different word for that. When we're talking TV shows, films, trailers, commercials, that kind of stuff. This continues our sync licensing journey that we've been having on the New Music Business podcast. If you want to catch up and dig into all things sync, check out some of my previous episodes with music supervisors like Jen Malone, who's a current music supervisor for Euphoria. She's also done Atlanta, Shelter, Lady Dynamite, Step Up, Creed 2, that kind of stuff. You can listen to my episode with, of course, Vo Williams, who's an artist who's had over 1,400 sync placements of his own music. He's also, of course, the instructor for Ari's Take Academy Advanced Sync Strategies course. Chris Doritas, who's a sync agent and DJ for KCRW and Disney music supervisor. Brian Vickers, he does mostly movie trailers for Disney. Also had Lindsay Wolfington. She is the music supervisor for Virgin River, and she placed me on One Tree Hill. We had Winslow Bright, who mostly works with commercials, and she worked at Search Party Music, singing brands like Sephora, Beyond Burger, Calvin Klein, Mini Cooper, that kind of stuff. So catch up, join us. We are going deep into the sync realm, but this episode is great because if you remember the previous episode that I had with Jen Miller, who runs Audio Socket, they're also a hybrid company, music library sync agency, and Musicbed is another one of these companies. So I think if you dug that episode, you're going to really get into this one. As always, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Ari Herstand. You can find all of us at Ari's Take on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Visit aristake.com, get on that email list. That's the most important thing you can do. aristake.com, get on that email list. All right, let's kick into the show. Daniel McCarthy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, is this a standing desk that you're behind?
It's standing right now. Yeah, it is.
That's fantastic. I need to work on my desk game. You'd think after a full year of working at home that I'd have the desk game on point. But now that I've moved, we've since moved into an office. I've moved back into other human beings being around, so I'm back seated. How has that standing desk been for you? Is it helping you keep your legs in action, or what's the point of these things?
I mean, everybody told me I wasn't going to use it, but I use it every day. Honestly, I don't like to sit down anymore.
That's
because my problem was I don't actually like physical activity. really that much. You know,
You're not a runner, okay?
Manual labor is not on the top of my fun list.
Sure.
So I felt like I was sitting all the time and then having back problems, and I don't know. It's been a game changer for me. So
all right,
I highly
maybe I got to
recommend
prioritize that. All right,
Do it.
Cool.
You're not a runner
Thank
either?
you. I became one over the pandemic because all the gym. I used to do the elliptical for my cardio, but then obviously when all gyms shut down, I'm just like, well, I live in LA and there's plenty of sunshine and no excuses for me to not get out and start running. So I became a runner. I don't care. I don't really like running. So I'm back to the elliptical. Literally like seconds after I got my second vaccine shot, I'm just like, all right, gym membership, let's go. Back on the elliptical. So
love it.
Anyway, cool. Well, we're not here to talk about standing desks. So let's kick into the music bed. This is something that I have had my eye on since you launched, and not just because you had billboards plastered all over New York and LA when you were going on, which I'm very curious about. But a lot of my friends were working with the music bed early on, and I've seen. I just had my eye on what you've been up to the last, I guess it's been 10 years now. If you could just I rarely ask my guest to tell the story because I'm more about like what you're working on now, but I am very curious about the inception story of the music bed, and I think it's going to give a really strong backdrop to everybody listening where you come from and the story behind the music bed before we get into the nitty-gritty of how you work now. So if you could just take us back to the beginning, I think that'd be super helpful.
Yeah, so I went to school for music business, but I dropped out of college, so that didn't go very far. And then I actually started as a graphic designer for an advertising agency. And so I did that for a few years, worked my way up to creative director, and then left to create my own agency. In the middle there, though, there was kind of this 1.5 to 2 year period where I was building an agency and we're getting clients, but you still have to pay the bills. And so I was a photographer. I had done some filmmaking. And so we started shooting kind of anything and everything from, I was intentionally trying to make an advertising agency, but kind of accidentally created a production company, maybe is the best way to put it. Like we were shooting weddings, we were doing films. All of a sudden we were getting pulled into client work and doing broadcast commercials that we had never done before. And then everything kind of started to merge. And so we had this creative agency that really I had come out of advertising, but this would have been like 13, 14 years ago. And so this was when like branded content was becoming a thing. And the Canon 5D Mark II had come out on the photo space, which was making like cinematic filmmaking accessible. So all these things were kind of merging. YouTube was blowing up. And we would go into these meetings with brands, and we were going to be doing branding and marketing, and we were going to be doing like web design and development, and all they wanted to talk about was video. Like it was like, hey, can you guys make a video for our homepage? And this is, it sounds like really stupid when I talk about it now, but this is what everybody was into at the time. And so we're like, yeah, we can do that. And we really, like I said, like we thought we were kind of creating this advertising agency. We ended up really almost creating a production company. And more than 50% of our revenue was coming from video and film of some sort. And we were doing anything from like streaming videos to broadcast commercials. And the problem that we kept running into was music. And so I felt like, with the right budget, I felt like, we have so much control as creatives over the concept, over the writing, over the talent, over everything. And then I felt like you would get to music, and it was just this world that I didn't really understand. And I didn't have a friend that was a music supervisor. I didn't even know at the time what that was. And I'm like, man, I just want to use this song on this film. Like, how am I supposed to do this? So you're emailing, like you're finding an artist on Bandcamp and emailing them. And you're just like trying to figure out how to do this. And I went to Nick, who co-founded the agency with me, and I was like, man, I think there's something here. Like I think we're in the wrong business. Like there's all these indie artists out there that are not being represented for film. And it's kind of simultaneously, I had worked on this big project for TCU, which is a university here locally. And
where's here?
In Fort Worth, Texas.
Okay.
So we had done a big project for them, and there was 10 or 15 videos that needed to be done, and we needed music for them. And I had a friend named Jordan Kreitz, and he was an artist that had grown up here, which is how we knew each other. He moved to Nashville, and I got this quote from a production music library, and I think at the time it was like $1,500 or $2,000 a piece for these little videos, which didn't seem that crazy. But in my mind, I'm like, I mean, like Jordan would do this, for $1,500 a piece. Like, why don't we just call one of our artist friends and see if they'll send us their instrumentals from the record, and it's great and it sounds great. And so we do that. The client's happy. Like, the musician was happy, and the comments were all the same. Like, oh, this sounds so good and fresh and like relevant and like, so this all kind of culminated, I think, to this idea that these industries are both kind of going through very similar things right now, which is like total transformation and disruption. Like the video industry, like everybody's becoming a filmmaker, and every photographer that has a camera can shoot cinematic footage, and everyone's starting a production company, and everybody's uploading videos to YouTube. And so like this was happening on the film world, and then simultaneously on the music world, it's like, you don't have to have $250,000 to make a great record, and you don't have to sign a record deal anymore. And I can make a record from my basement, and I can write it. And so it was like, it's almost like simultaneously these two industries were going through this very disruptive and transformative process 14, 15 years ago. And so we've just felt like this is it. We have to solve this problem. Like we have to figure out how to connect these musicians to these filmmakers. And so that's what started the journey of Musicbed. We're in our 10th year of actual launch, do business. We were working on it for about a year and a half before that. And so we launched. We had signed a couple of label partners and some different partners in the industry. We early on, a label in New York called Razor and Tie kind of gave us a chance. I knew some band managers in Nashville who got us connected with some independent artists, and we just started chasing down artists that we felt like would do really well in sync and do really well in film, and started to kind of curate this catalog. So we launched with 35 artists and in a terrible website, and that was slow and clunky and nasty. And then it just kind of grew. It was, doubling year over year. And then if you fast forward today, we represent about 1,400, 1,500 bands and composers and producers and writers. And we have about 1 million filmmakers that are using the platform on a regular basis. So it's really kind of it's been a fun, kind of crazy journey.
That's great. And that's, it's great to hear. And it makes a lot of sense that you saw this problem from an advertiser, from a filmmaker's perspective, an agency perspective. And then you saw how you could solve that. And by knowing some artists and being friends with some artists or musicians, you know that there are artists out there that could use that paycheck, and that it doesn't need to just be the $100,000 Toyota campaign. It could be the $1,500 internal web promo video. So let's break down what your business model is for people that aren't familiar with the Musicbed. Where you are now today, just break it down and what the main focus is and where most of the revenue comes from.
So we, our core competency is a roster of relevant, authentic artists that we curate for film. So we are a sync licensing platform that syncs music to anything from YouTube videos all the way up to Super Bowl ads and anything in between, podcasts. So the idea of the platform ultimately is that there was no Spotify for sync licensing. There was no one platform where, because as a filmmaker, I think this is, if you're an insider in the music industry, you can start rattling off words like publishing and masters and sync and record and PRO and I thought I wanted to be in the music business, and I started school but I didn't get far enough to understand the glossary. And so then as a creative, what I don't think the music industry realizes is like they don't understand any of this stuff. as a matter of fact, a filmmaker that wants to use a song in their video doesn't understand why it should be more complicated than just getting on a platform, picking a song, paying for it, moving on.
So do you represent all your artists?
Go ahead.
Do you represent all your artists one stop?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was one of the big keys was the filmmaker doesn't want to hear like, hey, we got the master side and, figure out publishing, right? Or like, they want to just come and get the song and use it.
So for clarity, you are one stop. And for those of you who don't know what one stop means, is that the creator of the video, the ad agency, the music supervisor, whomever can come to you. You've already cleared all the rights for all the songs in your catalog. They only need to make one stop. That's where the term comes from. They don't need to go to the label. They don't need to go to the publisher, make a bunch of stops all over town to clear all the rights. One-stop shop, Musicbed. Okay. So I was looking at your roster of your 1,400 artists that you were saying. So is it fair to say that all of these artists don't have publishing deals or record deals and they are just working with the Musicbed independently? Or have you actually worked out with some of their publishing companies or with their labels that you will be handling all the sync rights?
Yeah, so we actually, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've signed more record and publishing deals really than we have independent artists. So
Gotcha.
It's both. We sign artists directly, and that's really how we got started. And they control the rights, and it's a little bit easier. And maybe there's a couple of writers on the deal, but it's not that complicated.
Sure.
The more complicated journey is signing on a publishing partner, record label partner. But that's really what we've been spending a lot of focus and energy on the last couple of years. The problem ultimately is clearance. So, what you find is like the record industry is complicated and there's a lot of owners and there's a lot of clearances and there's a lot of stops and bottlenecks along the road. So the hardest thing for us when we sign these deals is working through all of the clearances so that we can be one stop, which by the way, we are one stop. It stresses me out to hear it because traditionally one stop is like cheap and it's not authentic, right? It's like if you could get a catalog of one stop, then it's probably not good. And one of the things we pride ourselves on is great, but no, it's funny.
I don't think that's the perception anymore. I think within the last 5 years, No. I think, some of the largest sync agencies in the world pride themselves on being one stop. All the music supervisors I've had on this show, which is more than I can even name right now, some of the biggest music supervisors in the world working on some of the largest, most notable projects in the world have said to me they prefer to work with one stops. So I think that perception of where it was maybe 10 years ago or where it is at some of the music libraries, which we're going to get into and differentiate between music libraries, sync licensing agencies, and what you do, I would say that is inaccurate perception right now where maybe the connotations are currently in 2021. So don't worry about calling it a one stop.
That makes me feel good. Thank you. I like
totally.
that.
That's just what I'm hearing from music supervisors and ad agencies and other sync licensing companies. They pride themselves on being one stop because they're essentially removing headaches from music supervisors, and music supervisors love sync agents because they are one stop and it saves them so much work.
And I think for us and why a lot of the supervisors that we work with love us is music supervisors are creatives.
Yes.
Like they have done a lot of administrative work and they've done the headaches of having to clear 14 different owners and publishers and but that's not what they love. They love being creative. And so when they can be creative and come and get this thing cleared and approved for their customer, their client very quickly, it makes their lives so much easier.
Yes. 100%. So let's talk about what the Musicbed business model is right now, because as I was digging into it, I see that, you have a subscription model for your indie filmmakers, for your YouTubers, the people that are your wedding filmmakers. That's, anywhere from, I think the current model is, as low as $20 a month for personal use, up to like $100 a month for small businesses, that kind of stuff. But I also see, like you said, you play Super Bowl commercials, and obviously that's more of a hands-on sync agency version, which I'm assuming are in the six figures for those placements. So break down the model for me and where most of the business comes from.
So it's really, our business is honestly split right down the middle. So half of our revenue is, what a lot of people have considered micro licensing, which is the smaller projects, anything from, YouTube streaming stuff, small businesses. And then the other half of our revenue comes for what we internally call custom licensing, which is, typically broadcast, large budget. So we have a couple of different levers, I guess, if you will, that send you into custom. So for us, big company, big placement, broadcast, TV, film, big advertising, like that's all going to be custom for us. Sure. And so, we felt like one of the things I think we solved early on for independents, or maybe even, artists that had been with a publisher previously, or was record labels and publishers they're not really staffed to manage this amount of licenses a month. So what it forces minimums. We're just not going to do a deal for less than $10,000. Okay, why? Well, because we only have 3 people on staff that can serve the license. Like we just can't. We can't. We can't do this. And to me, I'm like, if I'm the artist and 100 wedding filmmakers want to use my song for $100, I mean, I'm not mad about that, right? Like I'll take the $10,000 from 100 different filmmakers, call it a day, be happy. But traditionally, the record label, the publisher's not really set up to manage that. And so that's where kind of micro licensing was born, was this idea that, and for me, this was a lot of conversations we had early on. I don't feel like we're fighting this really anymore because I think everybody is cool with it. But early on, it was like, wait, you're doing what for how much? Are you dropping the bottom out of the industry? Are you devaluing music? And we would always say it's a different customer. It's a different audience size. Like for us, it really, like there's different questions we ask, but it really comes down to audience size. Like, is this gonna be seen by 50 million people, or is it gonna be seen by 50 people? Right. And so really early on, we felt like we were having a lot of those conversations about the value and how does this work. We always kind of came back to like, what is the song worth? So if the song is worth, let's say you believe that you write a song and you believe that song is worth $500,000 in sync licensing over the next 5 years. For me, I'm like, well, what do you care how I get it? So, record labels, maybe the record label model is that we get it with 2 really big syncs. Our model, maybe that we get it with 3,000 syncs. And I would actually argue that what we're doing is paying dividends because the micro licensing is what is driving so much of streaming today. And so it's actually like what we're doing for a lot of artists is actually driving revenue in a lot of other different
Explain
avenues.
to me what micro licensing specifically is. Like give me some examples of how this works. What are these videos? Where do they live? Why are they paying for licenses? How does this work?
So no, that's a great question. It's mostly small businesses, small freelance filmmakers. So it could be anything from, like this filmmaker, his like local barbershop. And they're like, we want to make a video for our, like some videos for our Instagram. We want to make some stuff to post on Facebook, and so it's okay, great. Here's a video. That filmmaker probably charged that barbershop $4,500, $5,000 for the video. So the song is $300, or they can use a subscription, which is $200 a month for that. And then they're posting it on YouTube. They're posting it on Instagram. That barbershop probably has less than 1,000 followers on Instagram. It just is this little. When we call it micro, it really is just kind of micro in scale, micro in audience. And so that's what a lot of our subscriptions are for, is for the freelance filmmaker that's doing smaller work that has much smaller audience sizes. Mm-hmm. But once you kind of cross over the edge of, hey, this is a Nike ad that's going to run during the Oscars, then it becomes a totally different conversation.
So let's talk through that a little bit more, because with where the legalities are right now, or just how YouTube and Facebook and Instagram are working, any user can upload a video, throw some music that they downloaded from iTunes into their video, or they can rip that music for free from another YouTube video, and they can upload it. And then how it works for most indie artists, let's say they have either their distributor, or they've engaged someone to handle their YouTube Content ID. And so Content ID flags it, and they throw some ads on it. And then, they're paying very, very tiny payments to the artist, pennies for the ad revenue that's generated. And now it's all legal, quote unquote. Yes, granted, the artist could, but most don't, say to YouTube, hey, rip this video down. I didn't give them permission for it. And so I'm assuming what you promise your clients is not going to happen. But then that brings me to the question, have you gotten all your 1,400 clients to say, don't check that checkbox when you use DistroKid that says to collect my YouTube revenue? Don't engage a YouTube ad revenue company, because we need to whitelist and we need to make sure that YouTube Content ID does not flag any of these videos. So step me through how this process actually works, like specifically.
It's a great question. So if we go back to Content ID, why does Content ID exist? Content ID exists because record labels sued YouTube, and YouTube created a Band-Aid to try to solve a problem. Yes. Content ID is legalized theft, so we're all on the same page. Yep. It's not legal. It shouldn't be legal. They're forcing the hand of the artist, and they're basically saying, it's exactly what you said. We'll pay you pennies on the dollar, or you could sue them. Mm-hmm. But good luck, right?
Right.
So it doesn't give the YouTuber a license. It doesn't give them a sync license. It doesn't give them the authority to use your song in their film. Right. It's a Band-Aid and an I'm sorry payment for not creating a better solution. So maybe one day they'll invite both of us to some conference table at YouTube where we can talk about this. Just let me know if you get a call.
Will do.
On the flip side of that, because Content ID exists, and we're obviously issuing licenses, we actually do require all of our artists to go through us for Content ID. So we do give the ability, if a filmmaker or brand or advertising agency licenses a song from Musicbed, we do give them the ability to clear the claim. Most of the time, that's because, it's Home Depot, and they're doing a big ad, and they don't want a Lowe's ad running in front of their Home Depot ad. And so they need to clear the claim. There's a lot of stuff happening right now with YouTube, where YouTube is saying, we're going to throw an ad on the video no matter what. So there's a lot of stuff happening right now that's going to change the way that this works. Yes. But in general, we have to have control over your Content ID, or we're going to piss off a million filmmakers.
Right.
What it typically is for artists is a both and. So a lot of filmmakers don't care that there's an ad on their video, and they're not trying to monetize their videos. Mm-hmm. So what will begin to happen over time is that YouTube is a free platform. They make money because they run ads. Mm-hmm. You don't get to turn an ad, ABC doesn't get to release a TV show and they just decide this TV show is not going to have any ads on it. So filmmakers, I think, are going to begin to understand, I'm using YouTube. It's a free platform. All my videos are going to have ads. So for us, for the artist, they shouldn't be getting a sync license or Content ID revenue. They should be getting a sync license and Content ID revenue. They should be getting both. It's the same thing as, Content ID revenue is not an equivalent, but it's way more a performance royalty than it is, the song is being played 1 billion times. You need to be getting paid for those plays.
Sure.
That has nothing to do with the filmmaker or the brand or the agency paying for the permission to use your song in a new creative production. Those are two completely different things. So,
I mean, it's you can equate it to a show being placed on, like you said, ABC, like the actual network television. A show on ABC primetime is going to pay for an upfront sync fee for the use of that, and then the songwriter is going to actually make back-end performance royalties from their PRO, from an ASCAP or a BMI or something, when that song gets played on TV. So it's essentially the same thing in that Content ID are those royalties that, like you said, are not perfect, but yes, is kind of like how performance royalties work on broadcast television.
And it's a little complicated right now because what you're talking about is a bunch of professionals that totally know how the industry works. And we're talking about, we're talking about 19, 20, 24, 30, we're talking about, we're talking about creatives that don't know how the music industry works and didn't sign up for this. So we also always make sure we try to always put ourselves in the shoes of our customers and the filmmakers and make sure, because it's easy for sure for us to be like, why don't they just understand? Well, I mean, no one told them, no one taught them. So our a lot of what we do is educating, but also making sure that we're not digging our heels into the ground. And I mean, if the music industry doesn't change, then they're not going to make it. So, so yeah, but as far as Content ID goes, we do require that we administer Content ID for our artists.
So send me through how it works for filmmakers. We're talking small businesses, filmmakers. We're not talking these Super Bowl commercials or primetime television or anything like that right now. For these quote unquote micro syncs, they get a subscription, however much they're paying a month. Do they have access to all the music unlimited to use for whatever purposes they want at the $100 a month level?
It's whatever they chose. So like if it's a wedding subscription, they can use unlimited music for weddings. But if they, if they're working on a Nike ad, then they have to do that separate. So it's kind of phases of clearance. So if you're a small business and you get a wedding, you get just a business subscription, and you decide that you're going to do a broadcast ad, that's not covered underneath your subscription. So they choose. It's pretty flexible. They choose it as they package up their subscription, like what coverage do they need, and they have unlimited access within those coverages.
So are there any exceptions that you give to some of these bigger brands, TV shows, movies, trailers, that kind of stuff, when it comes to the sync fees? For instance, I just had Lindsay Wolfington on the podcast, and she does Virgin River, the TV show on Netflix, as she's done a gazillion things. She was the one who placed me on One Tree Hill about a decade ago when she was in that music supervisor for that show. I was looking at the songs that she placed on Virgin River, and we talked through this a little bit. There were about 3 or 4 premiere songs or name artist songs per episode, and then there was like 5 to 10 other songs that were, for the most part, licensed by Extreme Music, which is one of the most popular music libraries, but micro-sync libraries, and that they were not paid that much for those licenses. I'm curious, when it comes to the Musicbed, do you operate in that way? Do you offer small fee licenses for big TV shows like that?
I think it's almost a trick question, because I would say everybody does. Like even even the ones that want to tell you they don't, they do. We're very flexible. We have really good relationships with our clients, and so sometimes it's just like, I've got $20,000 for this, and then a week later they're like, man, I got $2,500. Can you do it? The way that when we talk about what something is going to cost, like how much should this song cost? We really talk about it in 2 categories, and I hit on one of them earlier, which is audience size, and the other one we call impact. And so for instance, if it's going to be, you're 17 minutes into the show, it's it's the climax of the entire show. It's this massive moment, and this song. I mean, you're gonna hear a full 60 seconds of this song, and it's the chorus, right? That is going to be large audience, large impact, and there's not that much negotiation when it comes down to that. But then sometimes it's like, they just popped in the car and they hit the radio and it's kind of in the background and you don't really, I mean, like you could watch that scene 15 times and you really don't even remember the song, right? So it's like maybe really large audience, but really low impact. And those are the things where you can get a lot more flexible. I mean, like 3 years ago, which actually kind of blew my mind, we did a song for the Super Bowl that if I remember correctly, it was 100,000 or 115,000 or something. And it was 7 seconds, and I promise you, I could play the commercial for you 15 times, and you wouldn't hear the song. Wow. You'd be like, "Wait, what? Hold on!" And then if you go play the song, and then you're like, "Okay, that's you. Are you sure that song was in that commercial?" Yeah.
Wow.
So sometimes I even get surprised. I'm like, I don't even know how that. I mean, okay, cool. I mean.
That's great, and I'm happy to hear that whatever company that was, they paid $100,000 for music, and that's always great to hear, even though it was unrecognizable 7 seconds. But now let's go on the other end of the spectrum, where I've seen this way too frequently. A friend of mine, this happens all the time, unfortunately, but one very specific instance, a friend of mine, he was working with a sync agency. They're more of a music library. I'm not going to call them out by name. I still have friends who are with them. But Budweiser asked, essentially, they licensed my friend's song. Initially, it was going to be internet only. Everyone would know this song who's seen this commercial. It was essentially... The commercial was just this song, and it was a montage to this song, and they built an entire campaign around the chorus of this song. Now, the video blew up. It was one that you probably even remember it. It was the guy, and he leaves his dog at home, and the dog is waiting in the window, waiting for him to come back home, and he doesn't come back home. And then there's a sign up that says that, like, don't drink and drive. It was kind of a PSA, but it was a Budweiser commercial. And then he comes back holding a 6-pack. It's like, hey, buddy, how's it going? And I'm coming home to you. And like, the commercial went viral. It blew up. So then Budweiser took this song and they ran with it. They put it on radio commercials. They went to broadcast television. They blew it up everywhere. We're talking, it was on commercials literally at the Super Bowl. It was everywhere. And my friend only made $25,000 total. He couldn't even collect royalties on the back end because of the deal that it was signed. It was an original song that he wrote. And because initially it was internet only, and then, I'm talking like the impact of this song, Right. So, how do you protect that from happening? Because that was to me thievery, and my friend was totally screwed 100%, by that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think if you go back and look at that deal, the difference is what he was told is it's internet only. What was in the contract was probably full usage, which honestly comes down to some licensing person somewhere that, Budweiser calls and says, we're doing this deal. It's going to be quick and dirty, and it's just online, not a big thing. Okay, great. Well, did you put all those terms in the agreement, or did you just give them full usage to this song? And so, it goes viral, and they come back. They come back to the producer or whoever went and did the deal on the song, and they're like, "Hey, we need to go back and license, for the Super Bowl ad and to use the artist likeness and whatever." And they go back and look at the agreement, and they're like, we're good. They gave us everything we needed up front. We don't need to pay any extra. So that for me is like, again, and I'm not saying it couldn't happen like with one of the smaller deals. Like, I don't know. Would it be out of the, a wedding filmmaker does a wedding for a NFL player and it goes viral or something, whatever. I'm not saying it can't happen, but we basically have the line drawn in the sand and say like, hey, all of these things, that's a little bit, we're okay with a little bit of the risk here. All this stuff, like we got to have a conversation, and these sync licenses have to be really tight and all the I's have to be dotted and T's crossed. Like for us, we do, two huge things for us are renewals and add-ons, and however you want to call it. But it would be that where you have an agency that's testing an ad in one region, and it goes really well, and then they expand regions, and then they do it again, and then all of a sudden it's nationwide, and then and you get paid 5 different times, 5 different sync fees as the project grows. So that's stuff that you got to solve that on the front end, because if you just, not that we trust our clients, but if you don't make the contract reflect the usage, then you could accidentally, well, they told me it was just going to be an online ad. Well,
right.
All right. Well, you gave them everything. So,
yes. So always check the deal and check the contract. And I appreciate that you guys look out for that. Unfortunately, this sync licensing company did not. And they screwed over their artists. I mean, and this is happening. This happens all the time. Artists put their music into a library, and they give NBC or Fox like a blanket usage to use for what they were going to call buffer. But for instance, like a friend of mine was getting texted left and right because his song was used on The Voice when they got a ticket to go to Los Angeles, Hollywood, or for the next round, and he has a song, I'm leaving for Los Angeles, and it's blasting every break, and it's a huge part of it. And he didn't even get notified his song was going to be used, let alone paid for it, because they just like gave the music library a blanket use license, and they probably paid $1,000 for like 10,000 songs or whatever, or who knows. So it's like, that's these extremes of the options. Like I totally understand wedding video. I totally understand.
Well, and that's why we don't. Yeah, that's why we don't do subscriptions for anything broadcast. Like it's just too. There's too many things to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah, and then you do a blanket deal, and then we have competitors in the space that view like we have competitors in the space that would say, as long as it's getting placed on TV, you shouldn't even get a sync fee. You'll get your money on the back end of performance royalties. And I just go back to like, no, it's both.
Yes.
Like the artist wrote that song, and the artist has the permission to charge what they want, to give permission to another creative to create. Because that's the thing. Like that's the difference between, for me, it's like, well, why should it be different than performance royalties? Listen, when you are listening to a song on the radio, you're listening to that piece of art in its fullest form. It's done. That's what the artist made. They made that song, and you're listening to it, and they're getting a royalty for you listening to it. When you're watching that song on The Voice, and someone made another piece of art, and they used this piece of art to contribute to this other final piece of art, there should be permission granted for that, and the artist should be paid for that.
Yes.
And then, like every time it plays, get a royalty. That's great.
Sure.
But that's why sync licensing exists, is you can't just take a finished master and utilize it however you want to in any way. And then especially when you're talking about brands, I mean TV, like The Voice is one thing, but if that song would have been advertising Apple's latest product release, then it's a whole nother sphere of you're now utilizing this song to sell your product.
Or Budweiser, right? Like
which
that
we
happens.
love. That's great. That's a large portion of our market. Like we love that. We love it, but we want to make sure that the artist is getting the value out of it.
Totally. So give me some fee ranges on how this breaks down for all the different placements that you see come in for this bigger side.
Gosh, I should pull up our stuff and just list it off to you. I mean, I would say the vast majority is still coming. The vast majority is still coming under 100,000. So we still do a lot. So like if you're going to go regional broadcast, it's going to be over 5,000. If you're going to go national broadcast, it's going to come between 15, 35 like base. It starts to kind of ramp up. Things still seem to live under the 100,000 mark unless it becomes kind of tier one. So tier one would be major brand campaign, major product release, major moment. You can start getting the Super Bowl ads, and you can start talking $250,000 depending on what it is, what the artist is. So that probably doesn't help you, but I think, if I looked at our, like, the vast majority of things, they're going to live, which is a big range, but they're going to live between the 10 and the 100,000 mark.
And these are for ad campaigns though, right?
Ad campaigns. Yeah.
So talk to me about TV shows, movies, trailers, video games, that kind of stuff.
Because see, now you're talking to the wrong person. You should be talking to our head of licensing. Because I'm going to say something, they're going to be like, "You're so wrong, man. You don't have any idea." It is very different. But I really I don't feel like I'm the expert on values for that stuff. You should talk to Robbie.
Okay, so it's fair to say, though, that they are being paid something. You're not doing these blanket licenses for any broadcast networks?
No, we don't do any blanket licenses for networks.
So, okay, and I've been told in the space, and I'm not going to ask you to verify because you're not the expert on this side of it, but for those listening, TV shows, baseline, we're talking, cable TV in the background. They're in a coffee shop. You can barely tell it's being used. $500 up to a montage at the climax of the show, maybe $10,000 to $15,000 for that placement for an indie artist. That feel about right?
Yeah, we've seen them. I mean, don't get me started about indie artists versus major versus whatever, because I can have a lot of opinions about that. But I mean, we've seen indie artists go 25,000, 30,000 if it's going to be like series opener. I would lean towards I would never do a deal for broadcast for $500, but it does get down into that 1,000, 1,500 to and again, like we're talking about a really relational industry, and so you have a music supervisor that loves you, and we've been working together for a long time, and like in an industry like this, there's also a lot of trust involved, and so and this is what I would tell our artists: it's like, listen. When Adam or Steve tells me that he has $1,500 for this song, like he's not lying. Like we've done $50,000 deals with him, we've done $150,000 deals with him, we've done $17,000 deals with him. So he's not trying to work anybody. And so I think there's definitely times where we'll pass on a deal because it just doesn't make sense for the artist. Okay. And we don't want anyone to be taken advantage of. But for the most part, it is a very relational process, and we're working with supervisors on the TV film side, and on the advertising side, you're either working with a supervisor or sometimes a producer, and again, they're not like this maybe sounds offensive, but like it's not their money. Right. Like they're not being frugal with it. Like it's their dollar. Like they're on the job to get the creative finished, and they do have a budget.
But they have a budget, but their budget might be you have $100,000 for all the music per episode. Now, Universal comes to them and they're like, "Oh, you want to place this song? That's going to cost you $85,000." So then the music studio is like, "I only have $15,000 left for these other 8 indie songs," and so that's why they're getting down to like, "I only have $500 for you." That's because they paid Universal $85,000 because Universal said you can't use this. Imagine Dragons song unless you pay us $85,000 or something like that. So like, well, we really want this. And so, yeah, it's not their money, but they are, they do have the budget and they are breaking it down how they see fit.
Yeah. And it really comes down to like your licensing, like our licensing team knowing, which song, like we represent thousands and thousands of songs, and they're all great, but some of them have magic. And you better freaking know which ones they are, and you know what I'm saying? Like, like there is, like, it's very nuanced. When to push, when to not push. I only have 10,000. Okay, well this is going to be 25, or you can't use it. And we see it on the advertising side too, which is just like, listen, when everybody falls in love with the song, it's game over, man. It's that's when it's fun, but also like we're not trying to screw anybody. We're trying to build relationships. We want these people to work with us for a long time. So it's nuanced for sure.
So I want to get back to when you said earlier, if an artist says they have this music or this catalog and they'd like to see $500,000 over the next 5 years and they don't care where it comes from, How realistic is that? What are your 1,400 artists seeing annually in terms of sync revenue?
We have some artists making, we have artists making millions a year, and we have artists, we have some. I probably shouldn't say artists. We have some publishers. Like we just had a conversation with a publisher last week that's been with us for 3 or 4 years, and we've netted them about $10 million since they started with us. And then we have artists.
How big is their catalog?
That's a great question. I think there's probably 60, 70 artists so it's a lot. It's pretty big chunk of the catalog. And and then we have indie artists that are making $750 a month or $1,500 a month. So a lot of it comes
which is
down
still
to,
great. Are you saying like the of your 1,400 artists, there's no one making less than $750 a month?
I think if I went right now, there's got to be 75 artists that didn't make anything last month. I mean, it's like, I think the average, Nick could pull the average for you, which Nick should probably be on the call, but I think at one point the average was like $1,200 a month or $1,500 a month or something, but then it ranges, some lower and then some way higher.
Sure.
We've had artists have $100,000 months easy consistently.
Wow. Yeah, sure.
So it comes down to, this is where it even comes down to like one of the questions that Nick gets frequently is, well, your catalog is like so big, it's 1,500 artists and there's a lot of music and it's really competitive, to which I come more from the creative side. Like, remember, I come from the agency side. So I'm like, you're not competing with anybody. You're competing with yourself. Like, trust me, no one's coming to Musicbed thinking like, I don't know, I'm just going to place whatever's on the homepage, like I'm going to just place like whatever the first song I listen to. Like, they're coming for something. So my whole point is like the concept, the creative concept, the creative director, ultimately, the concept is what makes the decision. Are we gonna? Is this going to be an original score? Are we going to do a cover? Are we placing a top 40 song? Do we want something like indie and super emerging that we can kind of introduce to the world? Is it going to be folk? Does it need to be country? Like, I'm like, I hate to break it to you, but a lot of those decisions are made before they get to us. And our job is to help find that perfect song. And then maybe they were coming for like an indie folk sound, and we have 7 or 8 bands that maybe fit the bill, but they need something that talks about Georgia and the summer. And you're like, well, we only have one song that fits that, right? So like,
sure.
I think that's where it can sometimes feel competitive and large, but when you think of it through the eyes of the creative, the concept is what drives the placement. And, and that's where I'm like, I don't view, and this is just something, it is what it is, but I don't view an indie musician's song less valuable than a top 40 song, because to me, the song is the song. Like, was it the perfect song for your project, or was it not the perfect song for your project? Like, right. I don't like the idea that you place that song because you're on a budget.
Right.
So it was either the right thing or it wasn't the right thing. And if it's the right thing, then the budget will make itself work.
Love that. Talk to me about how the interface looks for the people who want to license music when they come and they log into their account and they're like, all right, I need a song about Georgia in the summer. Can they search lyrics? Can they search genre, BPM? What are the searching capabilities? Yeah,
so we're actually about to roll out lyrical theme, which I think is going to be really huge. You can search lyrics, genre. We have everything tagged by genre, mood. I should pull it up right now. You can search builds. We're about to release key filtering, which is important to the filmmaker, which is kind of a geeky music thing. But
you mean like, is this in the key of A minor? What do you mean key filtering?
Well, so a lot of times what'll happen is if you're doing a short film or something that's 8 or 9 minutes long, and you have one song that's kind of carrying most of the film, but you got to get in and out of it. So you have one song that's in the key of C. Well, I don't. I need a song to kind of tag at the end, or maybe I need something kind of ambient and cinematic at the beginning to help me get into it. Well, you need to know that like what is compatible with the key of C, and
A minor, the relative minor.
There you go. See, yeah. So
Right.
so you can name all those things, but a filmmaker's like, huh? Like, I don't know what this means. They're just thinking, I just want something compatible, right? They're not thinking of like fifths and what. So it's yeah. So that some of those features are actually about to roll out to make it even easier for the filmmaker to find the right track. But right now you can search by lyric, genre, mood, keyword, BPM.
Cool. Talk to me on the let's call it the agency side, when you're pitching or you're working directly with music supervisors and ad agencies. Are they coming into your database and searching, or are they coming to you and saying, "Hey, here's our brief," and they're sending the brief to all of the sync agents, and then you do the filtering and you send back a dedicated pitch?
It's both. So 5 years ago, it was almost exclusively them filtering. And we rolled out, it's kind of complicated. Like this is a word, and it's like, you're not music supervisors. You can't call it that. I'm like, well, okay. Anyway, whatever you want to call it, supervision, search, whatever.
Yeah.
We rolled that out a couple of years ago. So it's not supervision amongst the world. It's search amongst our roster.
Sure.
And we probably fulfill 25 of those a day. And so it's growing rapidly, which is really that. I mean, that's the fun part, even for our team, is being able to search the roster and fulfill a brief and feel like you're a creative partner. And that the creative partner side of the business has really grown over the last 2 or 3 years. And a lot of supervisors and agencies and producers and creative directors want to find it. They want to sort, kind of find a deep cut on page 37 that's perfect. And then sometimes they just want to submit a brief and have us send back. We'll turn around a playlist for them, typically same day, and with 20, 25 songs that work. And sometimes it's, do you have anything that sounds like this? Sometimes it's a lyrical theme. Sometimes it's a full brief. But yeah, we do 25, 30 of those a day.
Are you using Disco?
We don't use Disco. I just saw that the other day.
You're the first person in sync I've spoken to in about a year and a half that doesn't use Disco. What do you use when you put a playlist together? You use your own proprietary software?
Yeah, like we built Disco, but we call it Musicbed. Like, I don't know. Like, we are Disco. Well, because Disco is, I just saw this the other day, like Disco is basically like everything, right? Like the world.
I mean, anyone can use it.
Or you can use it for your own roster.
No, you can use it for your own roster. Okay. Most sync agencies are using it. I'll have to tell Carl that you built it. I've talked to Disco frequently. Katrina and Carl.
Is Carl the CEO?
Yes.
I want to talk to that guy, man. I saw this the other day, and I forget.
I'll connect the two of you. I'm sure he'd love to chat with you. They're based in Australia, but to be honest, virtually everybody I've spoken to in sync, you're literally the first person in a year and a half that doesn't use Disco. And it's like most music supervisors use it, most sync agencies use it. They have a version for sync licensing companies. They have a version for artists, for music supervisors. You can filter it. It's like, instead of having everything is metadata tagged, lyrics are included, mood, BPM. It sounds like your database, but anyone can use it. And then so instead of me emailing you a link to a Dropbox or emailing a link to the Musicbed, whatever, it's literally one click, add it to my Disco library if I'm a music supervisor, and now I can filter through all these things. So it's pretty crazy how in the last 2-3 years or so, how many people in sync have adopted that technology and adopted what they're using. And even artists, they use it for their own stuff. Instead of sending a SoundCloud playlist, now they're sending a Disco playlist. It's just cleaner and all of that. So that's interesting. I'll connect it.
Well, I wonder if we could API. I mean, it seems like we could probably API in and pretty easily.
Yeah. I'll connect you guys. I think that would be a good conversation. Speaking of, on the artist side, if artists want to work with the Musicbed, how do they go about that? Do you take submissions, or is it through referrals? How does that work?
We do, yeah. We usually open up submissions once a year. We used to do a lot more than we did, and then the thing is, we signed so many record deals and publishing partners and band managers that so much of our new artist acquisition is through people that we're already in relationship with. Sure. But Nick, who's my co-founder, is building out really kind of ramping up his team right now to start making sure that we don't slow down on being able to accept submissions. I mean, some of our best artists have come through submissions.
Sure.
So
cool. Good to know.
How do you do it would be, I don't know if I'm allowed to give his email out. Probably shouldn't put his email out.
No. What I was going to say is, and we'll talk about this later. I'm going to follow up with you. Ari's Tech Academy, we have an online course on sync licensing, and part of our system is we partner with sync agencies, and our students, we're training them how to be successful in sync and how to be really great writers and producers in the sync realm. And so we do submissions twice a year to our sync agency partners. So we kind of vet out the music. We work with our students, they're all artists and producers, and then they can submit, and then our panel of judges, basically internal team, goes through, picks out all of the music that's ready, and then we pass along the best of the best to our sync agency partners. And they really appreciate that, because we're not only have we trained all of our artists exactly how sync works, they're completely, they're experts now in how sync works, right. But they also know the game and they know all it all. So, and their music's perfect now for sync, and it's authentic. They're all artists and producers that, So, we'll have to talk. And if you want to be part of that program, we'd love to.
Yeah, we would love to. That's awesome.
Cool. Well, Daniel, this has been great. Time just flew by. I have one final question for you that I ask everybody who comes on the show. What does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
Oh my gosh, to make it?
To make it. What does it mean to make it?
I saw that question come across, and I was like, I'm going to figure it out on the fly. Man, I think what does it mean to make it in the new music business? I think we're in an interesting space because we're in the middle of technology and music, two things that like to move real fast. Mm-hmm. So I think for us, we talk about this frequently, which is disrupting ourselves. So I personally don't believe you ever make it. But there's that. I think as soon as you make it and you get off your whiteboard, then you've kind of lost. So I think we talk about all the time, just, we're in these, we're sandwiched in between these industries that are moving at a rapid pace. And the second that we do feel like we've actually made it, it's like really close to game over. So, to me, it's like, it's like, for us, it is keeping our eyes on our customers and consistently solving problems for them, and not losing sight of, I think we can get stuck. We can get stuck doing business the old way. I mean, literally, this podcast exists because of the 80s and the 90s, and just an entire industry they're all still dinosaurs. Mm-hmm. And so, to me, we could very easily be the next generation of dinosaurs. Like we created the new music business, and look at us, we made it, and and then all these, and then disco pops up, and we're like, no, that's dumb. I mean, right? And we're like, no. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's how do you continuously make it year over year, and the hardest thing is to pivot and do things differently that have been successful for a decade, and well, now you have to change it because the industry, they're either going to force you to change it or you can lead the change.
I love it. Lead the change. Daniel McCarthy, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you. Good talking with you.